Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here again with Inez. How are you doing, Inez?
I'm doing well, other than the continued wildfires from Canada. I'm starting to
That's still going on?
reprise my neocon roots. I'm going to invade Canada, I think, over. This is just it's very obnoxious. It's like every day now is bad air quality.
They're doing it's still going on. I thought that the news just got sick of it, but it's still happening. It hasn't improved.
Well, I mean, it's not as bad as it was. It's not as bad as like the initial few days where it looked apocalyptic everywhere and it was awful. But it's just continually there is stuff in the air. There's pollutants in the air that are coming down. The wildfires are still burning. They still haven't done much to change their management of the forest going forward. So I really hope this is not going to be something that we deal with every summer because it's hard to be outside. It's anyway, it sucks. But let's move on from that.
Hmm, that does suck. Well, yeah, I mean, in California, I heard that the smog used to be really bad out here 10, like 15, maybe 20 years ago. And it's gotten better. I've never noticed an air quality issue. So yeah, that's all I know about air. All I know is that California has good
Yeah.
governance. That's my concluding
California
from
has
that.
the same problem in the sense that there are huge and raging wildfires. And of course, the left calls that climate change, and I would call it the total inability to manage the forest, even to the level that the Native Americans in California did before
It could be
everybody
both, right?
understood.
It could be both, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure, but the major problem is the management of the forest. I mean, if you talk to anybody in forest management or in firefighting, it's there's some very basic problems. Some of them having to do with environmentalism and not wanting to harm Mother Gaia or whatever. They don't do as many controlled burns as they used to. The other problem in California is simply that the sprawl is exceeding out into right areas that are naturally have a lot of like burns that run through, so the fires are more devastating because more people lose their homes because they're building in the same way sort of New Orleans can expect to be flooded in a big one every 20, 30, 50 years. In California there are going to be wildfires, but they're being made worse by non-management. A lot of it's federal land too, so there's plenty of blame to go around. Anyway, all these are Western concerns.
Yeah, isn't there a policy angle here? Because I don't know about the fire insurance, but I know that the federal government either requires insurance coverage for like things in the Gulf, or they just insure it themselves, right? I remember during Hurricane Katrina, this was a big problem that the federal government would insure this stuff. I'm sure they must do something similar for the fires. So it's just like we build and we maintain land in like just areas where people shouldn't live.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is that sort of perspective that we should only live in certain places and not, I love Las Vegas, for example. I think it's a monument to American audacity to put something that requires that much energy and water, just put it right in the middle of the desert. So I think there's a certain man conquers nature element here, but it's also true that a lot of these states are not managing their resources well. California has a huge water problem, as I'm sure anyone in California for the last 30 to 30 years knows that there have been droughts, so that's part of it. But the other part of it is the state is completely unable to maintain a reservoir system, in part because they have so many environmental regulations and quote unquote friendly lawsuits, right, from environmental groups that it becomes very, very difficult to build anything. And then they also, for the same reason, they don't manage the forest. They don't do controlled burns. They don't do some of the things that were done for the previous 100 years. And like I said, even going back well before the state was a state, right? It's just sort of really basic stuff. If you talk to some of the folks in the forest management industry or in fire, part of it was getting rid of the lumber industry because the lumber industry was doing it for California for a long time because they were chopping down a lot of the trees, and they were doing it for profit, but the state benefited because there were fewer forest fires. But yeah, I don't know. We always think about going backwards in time, that it would be more natural, right? That there would be more trees or whatever, but that's not the case in a lot of places. That a lot of America looked much less forested than it is right now.
Have you read Charles Mann's 1491?
No.
Highly recommended. It's about basically, yeah, the continent and what it looked like before 1492, before Columbus came to the Western Hemisphere. And yeah, that's one of the points he makes. Talks about the management of nature, and then he has a follow up book called 1493, which is the direct impact of European colonization. So two of the best books I've read in many, many years. I would recommend you and everyone else read them. Yeah, I like Man Conquering Nature too. I think Las Vegas would exist. As long as the market could support it, right? I'm pretty sure the market could support Las Vegas, right? It's just these some of these other things, like these communities in New Orleans, or in the mountains of California, where humans just shouldn't be without government support. If they can pay for it, fine. But it's they're sort of, a lot of people are just offloading the risk uh, onto everyone else. One thing that's on my mind, I want to ask you about this because it's just something that happened to me, but I think there's like an angle about like, sort of where our culture is going. So I just got some money from Twitter. They are giving you a cut of your ad revenue. I saw that this Brian Krasenstein guy got 25 grand. I saw this Ashley St. Clair woman get like 7 or 8 grand, and I wasn't as big as them. I got 1,700. They just sent me like a pop up. So I mean, this is like, it's like so cool. Like, just have money out of nowhere. Like, that's just like, it's like when you're not expecting it. Just a company gives you money. It's really, really cool. It's like better than earning it.
I'm just
Uh,
gonna have some competition with Threads already. He's got to keep the big
yeah,
money
well,
making creators on the website.
maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. But yeah, that's got to be. I mean, they've got to be giving it to a lot of people. Or maybe they're picking their favorites. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not that huge of an account, but I mean, I must have just. I just think I just had a really good month. So maybe it's not about how big your account is. Just like the last month, how many impressions you've got. Um,
Yeah, I think I'm just under the cutoff. I was looking at. I've basically never. I had to find the analytics tab. I've never looked at it, but it looks like I'm just under the cutoff on most of months. I have like 4.8 or 4.9 million views, which I guess you
what are you
need
supposed to have?
five
What is that? What is
million
it? Oh, you have to have 5 million
in the
impressions over a
last
month.
several months or something like that. And it's
Oh,
consistent. Like, you
really?
have to make it over some month. I'm just below it, of course. I'm like, finish just out
Interesting.
of the
Yeah.
money here. I mean, it'll create some interesting incentives. There's definitely an incentive to create engagement. So I think it's also tied to replies, right? So there's
Yeah.
definitely an incentive, even more than there already was, to just give hot takes that are going to make people really mad.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find my analytics. Where's that under? That's under
Oh, it took me a while to find. It's like under professional tab. It's I gotta find it
professional
again.
tools.
I can't. Yeah,
There's
it's under professional tools, and then there's something called analytics under it. I think I clicked around in the tabs for a while.
Oh, I found it. It's under
Okay.
creators. For me, it's under Creator Studio.
Oh, that's
So
probably right. I don't know. I clicked
oh wow,
around a
so
little.
last month I had 41.8 million
Oh
impressions.
wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I busted through that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then last month it doesn't have 48.2
Yeah.
million. So
Yeah.
basically the
You can
same
go
thing. Yeah.
backwards. Yeah.
Yeah. 52 points. Okay. So it's 5 million over like a month. Is that what it's supposed to be?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I did do that. That's pretty awesome. And so that is cool. And you're right. Yeah, I mean, there already is the incentive to sort of, there is an incentive already to maximize your follower count. And this is just becoming like more and more direct, right? Like, we're going to give you money directly for, whatever the tweets that go viral. Um, and I wonder what this is sort of going to, what is this sort of going to do, right? I mean, it seems like it's just going to be Twitter on steroids. I mean, I think people who want to maximize engagement are already going to maximize engagement, but I think you could see it as like more of like a business model for people. Now, I don't think it's like a great, yeah. I mean, it's not hard. Like, if you're as big as Crescenstein, who's one of like the biggest, you get 25 grand, a month. Right. So it's not like anyone can just go up there and start making thousands of dollars, but I do wonder sort of what this is going to do with Twitter. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, like, I've never, I've always used it much more as genuine social media, I guess. And that I like the people that I meet on there. You read some interesting stuff, you learn some interesting stuff. People recommend things to you. You follow people with a particular expertise. And then you have repeated interactions, which actually is, in terms of a societal level, people complain a lot about Twitter. I think things like TikTok are much worse, not only because the algorithm is more addictive, but because there are no repeated interactions. It is much more like watching television. It's like super targeted television, which is very passive, whereas Twitter actually seems to me to be a pretty good social media app where you do have repeated interactions with people. You get to know them, whether by their real names or not, but you get to know them. I mean, I know I've made a lot of real life friends off of Twitter. I know some people who have found significant others on Twitter. Like, I think Twitter actually is genuinely social in a way that, like TikTok is not. It's very passive, right? It's content creation. So to the extent that Twitter becomes content creation, I think that would be bad. But I mean, people already, like you said, people already have incentives to try to do it. I just haven't really ever used the app that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to, I have books and I have a Substack. So I do like consciously try to grow my follower count, right? Like I do that. I don't like make stuff up or like, just do it at any cost or say dishonest things. But I do want more people following me. And it's like pretty obvious, like the kind of thing. It's usually, yeah, it's usually pretty like, there is a formula. Like people love race statistics. People love crime stories. People love criticisms of the media. It's really, you can really play the hits, and it's a sort of, it's pretty, it's pretty obvious what's going to get,
You don't
what's
have
going
like,
to
but
get
like, I want to
attention.
know what are your left wing hits? Like, what gets you a lot of engagement because you have views
Almost
on
not,
both
almost
sides.
nothing.
So
Almost not, almost. I mean, I get the left wing don't get me any benefit. They get a lot of hate engagement. I think I'm too much on the right. So, I mean, sometimes the things do good. Like I had a one making fun of the Arizona Republican Party. They ran out of money because they were like suing to overturn the 2020 election. Maybe they weren't suing; they were paying election consultants. So like now the Arizona Republican Party is broke, and like Meghan McCain retweeted that, and like David Frum, and like a few other people. So like, I mean, I don't know, that's not even left wing. That's like center right, never Trumpers. But no, it's too. You're in a box. Like I am right coded. Like I'm not going to go that viral on left wing Twitter, almost no matter what I say.
interesting. I don't know. I just never thought about it. Honestly, I'm not like trying to be a jerk and say like, oh, I don't care. I've always used it as a more social thing.
Yeah.
And so I haven't ever sort of kept track of any of this or whatever. My primary use of Twitter is definitely, I just think there's a lot of really interesting stuff being published on Twitter. So I guess I use it more the way that people did use Substack, which or do use Substack. Cause I'm not as much of a Substack person. I don't have one. I don't like, I read, obviously I follow a certain number of people on Substack and I read stuff from Substack, but I get a lot of content from Twitter in terms of stuff that I haven't read before, or I often find it more interesting than what's sort of curated, I guess, by any of the major news sites, even those on the right. I find it more interesting. My Twitter feed is a curation of thoughts and links to articles from people that whose thought I find or way of thinking I find interesting, and then a place to engage with those people and actually start a conversation. Be like, well, that's a really interesting point you've made, but like, here's the counterpoint, and like have an actual discussion. Which I know that people say that Twitter is not. You can't have a real discussion on Twitter. That just hasn't been my experience. I try to reply. I reply to a lot of people. I reply to people in my comments all the time. The only thing I ever do is mute people if like, there's always somebody who just thinks that it's really funny to reply to the same stuff to every tweet. I get bored of that and I mute people. I don't care if you say bad stuff about me. I just don't want to hear that. Like, it gets very boring if you have the same like formula for every single tweet that has nothing to do with what I actually said. Then I get bored and I mute.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I use it in that normal way too. Actually, I mean, I don't like the influencer tweets. Like I like actually like I mute a lot of people. Um, that just are not worth it, who keep popping up in my feed. And then I used to respond more. I don't know, as long as I've gotten sort of bigger, it's been like more like trash relative to like when I was a really small account. Like you had to be like sort of smart to have found me. It was just like academics or like people who like had written like who had read like some serious pieces I've written. And so like everyone who followed me was smart, but like there's so, I mean, this is the downside of actually trying to fill your engagement. You end up hating your followers because they're all, they're all sort of stupid. They just found you because of some viral tweet. So so yeah, in my feed, I am like following the people who are smart, who have the insights. Yeah, it's great curation, for, for whatever you're interested in. I have like a handful on like the, Russia, Ukraine specialists. I have some people on, some economists, some, different kinds of things like political, horse race kind of coverage that I like. Yeah, it's a great tool. I mean, it's a great tool. I am not negative. I am not negative on Twitter anyway, and meeting people too. Like people will reach out to me. Like it's the easiest way. Like if I want to get in touch with someone or someone wants to get in touch with me, like Twitter is better than like email. It just usually is. I'm usually going to see it faster, and I'm usually going to respond quicker. It's like a great DM system too.
Yeah, no, completely. That's what's so bad about getting suspended, honestly, is I hate it when the people that I'm in DMs with get suspended. Um, but for some reason, I've never been suspended. I maybe once, I can't recall for what, but I say very similar things, and for some reason, like I don't get suspended. I guess I was on I have gotten, what do you call it? Like ratcheted down. Like I've definitely gotten shadow banned, and before Elon Musk took over, for sure. You couldn't find me if you put in my name, and it wouldn't pop up, and all those various tricks. But I've never actually been booted off of Twitter.
One of the accounts that got suspended recently, though, like, you ever seen a radical feminist Hitler?
Mhm.
Yeah, she's suspended. It's really unfortunate. I really
She's
enjoyed
funny.
that.
She's funny. I
Yeah,
mean, I, I disagree with obviously like a lot of the stuff that she tweets, but she's very
yeah.
funny, and that's
Well,
well
I
worth
like
it.
people who are original. I don't like this, the people who are just like, you could like, okay, there's like dissident right, there's like the trad, like, like everyone is like sort of in this category. I like people who, combine feminism and Hitler. Like I like bringing these like things together that usually don't go together. Yeah, but you can find an account like that. It could be fun.
Yeah, I think my feed is a lot of people of that type, plus a lot of like serious people. So I really enjoy it. I also actually, it serves the same function. I used to really like reading the comments. Everybody always tells you don't read the comments. Everyone in sort of DC world or whatever tells you don't read the comments. I like reading the comments. I think on most articles, the comments, like, yes, of course, you have the six people with the alternating between the one and the exclamation point, right? But actually, I think there are some really great comments, and you do get input from people who are outside of your circles. I think Twitter's the same way. I really like that. So actually, I think more than half the people I follow are just ordinary people in a bunch of different walks of life who have replied to me at one point, and I had a conversation with, and I found them thoughtful and interesting. And I think that's like I am very like democratic. I guess I use Twitter in a very
No,
democratic sort of way. Yeah.
I was just thinking it as your experience is like so nice. Like it seems like you're just like the comments and like my experience is it's all over the place. I mean, it really, there's some people who are great, and then a lot of people who are just idiots, who are just aggressive, who are just stupid. But yeah, what are you
I
gonna
mean,
you might
I get
you might
those
you
too,
might
but I just ignore it. It doesn't bother me. I think, I actually think I tweeted this. My only superpower is not caring. I genuinely don't care. If people that I've never met, or like, they don't know anything about me. What do they know about me? They misinterpreted one thing that I said. I mean, who cares what their opinion is?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't, maybe you're even more calm than me, but yeah, I think I'm like more, more, uninterested in the people's like attacks than others. Like I saw this, there's this guy named Tim Ferriss. I don't know who he is. Is he like he's famous for, what is he? Do you know what Tim Ferriss is? He's like really famous. Let me see. Tim Ferriss is an American entrepreneur. Okay. Anyways, wrote this article, things that suck about being famous or something like that. And he's like, oh, I get a death threat once a month. I'm like, once a month? This guy thinks that's worth mentioning. That's like, once a month would be like, I'm on vacation, that would be something like that. So yeah, I mean, people can have different sort of levels of, what they could tolerate. This is not for, it's not for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, look, I know that I don't know why this is not like sort of bravado on my part. I don't, it just really doesn't touch me much. The only things that touch me are actually to the positive, where, I actually meet people, or I have an interesting conversation with somebody that I never would have had the chance to talk to. I mean, you just would never, um, be able to talk about something political or substantive with random people that you meet in a coffee shop, really. Because I mean, how many of us are having those kinds of conversations with people that we, have never met or don't know or aren't friends of ours or whatever. So I just find it a really useful way to talk to people. But yeah, I guess I know this all sounds very corny and earnest, but it's really true. I think it's a great place to talk to people and to meet people that you never would otherwise, and some of them actually become your friends.
Yeah, yeah, they become my friends too. Yeah, yeah, we agree. We're both. I mean, we're both have positive attitudes for Twitter. If you're using Twitter and
I'd have an
you're
even more
overall,
positive attitude if they were giving me a check for what I was already doing. That'd be great.
oh
But
no, you gotta effort
yeah,
you gotta effort
I have
more
to be
often.
meaner. I have to,
You
maybe I
you
need
know
to
what you
tweet
could
more
do?
about, people really didn't like that. I didn't like Sound of Freedom very much. People did not like that. So maybe I should just tweet how much I don't like that over and over again. And then I'll get some money.
Did they call you a pedophile? Did
Oh
they say
yeah,
that you might
totally. A Zionist pedophile, because that's the
oh, Zionist
connection.
pedophile?
Yeah.
That's
See, I
great.
find that stuff funny. Like, it doesn't bother me. I don't care. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. You know
anyway.
yourself. Yeah. That's good. The yeah, yeah, that's that's yeah, that is fun. Sound of freedom. Yeah, I do want to see that. They really do get the grooming thing and I just clicked some Daily Caller article the other day. It was like, I don't know, it was like a film or something. Just the ad popped up. Groomers, grooming. It's like it's become sort of this, crazy. It's like the right is having this like satanic panic of the 1980s, but it's like just on the right. It's like, they're having their own thing where like the rest of society is not sort of
No,
joining in.
okay, so that wasn't my critique of the movie. I mean, I think there are good reasons to worry. I mean, I've always been of the opinion that the grooming going on is actually not to groom children for pedophiles so much. That's like sort of an incidental aspect when you have this cultural, you have a cultural standard that allows adults to talk to children about sexual topics. It's going to be easier for people who actually have that kind of sick intention with children. But I think the real grooming going on here is to make children activists, right? I mean, it is adults who want their own worldview and a lot of the lies they've told themselves to be reflected backwards up to them by children who don't know any better, and to whom the categories male and female are still abstract or whatever. But that wasn't my problem with the movie. I just thought it wasn't very good. Like,
But that's not
the
what those
script
people
was
mean by
wooden.
grooming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the script, it's connected. But anyway, no, I mean, look, the movie's about a real phenomenon, right? It's a real thing. It's a true story. I just thought it was bad. Like, the script was wooden and the characters are wooden, and they have that thing where they don't allow flaws or conflict in the characters. It's that very right wing. Andrew Clavin has this great way of talking about it, where he says um, that the right is too concerned with creating role models instead of telling a realistic and true story. There's no conflict, for example, between this guy going halfway around the world and abandoning his own large family, right, to do some really, really dangerous things for, the child of someone he's never met, a child he's never met. That's very heroic on the one hand, but, doesn't even show, he doesn't hesitate for a moment. He doesn't think, well, what are my 6 children or whatever going to do without me, right? If I die in this Columbia hellhole, like, what are my wife and children going to do without me? That's just a completely lack of conflict, and it makes it very unrealistic, and it's almost like a superhero movie. you know I don't know, I think it's too serious a
Yeah.
subject to treat with that kind of
Yeah.
superficiality.
Well, I haven't.
I,
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I can't
yeah,
comment.
so
I've
I'd
just
be
sort of
curious what
watching.
you think. Everyone else seems to love it. I seem to be very much in the minority in this, but I just thought it was very wooden. And anyway, I should just probably tweet that 65 times so that I get my paycheck from
Yeah.
Elon Musk.
No, you have to. No, people have to, for followers. You'll go viral, but for followers, they have to like what you're saying. That's the thing. You can get a lot of engagement. Oh well, you'll
Yeah,
get the
I think
check.
it's based on
Actually, it won't matter.
engagement,
You won't get
though.
followers, but you'll get engagement. Yeah, that's true. Um,
No,
yeah. Well, are you
I'm
gonna
not going to
watch?
do that, to be clear.
I don't get. I don't. I can't. I have a family. It's hard to get to the movies often, but I do want to find a way to see the Barbie film. I saw the I
That's
wasn't
what
that
you want to
interested in it,
see out of all of the
but
things that are coming out.
I want to see Oppenheimer too. But I saw the trailer for Barbie with like Ken, and I just think it just seems fascinating to me. And I like the actress too who plays Barbie too. So are
Well,
you
that's
gonna try to see the
controversial
Barbie
online
movie?
now. That's
I
controversial,
know it's
to say that
somebody
Margot
called it,
Robbie
yeah.
is hot. Of course she's
Yeah,
hot.
the trad cells are very, yeah, they don't like her. So who do they like, by the way? Never mind. These people aren't worth paying attention to. But are you going to try to see the Barbie movie?
I only if I see like a double header with Oppenheimer.
Okay, you watch Oppenheimer. I'll watch Barbie, and hopefully I'll watch
Um,
Oppenheimer. I do want to watch Oppenheimer too.
I
Uh,
Oppenheimer, and then there's the Napoleon trailer looked really good.
oh yeah, that's I saw that. That's a long time for that's not coming out till November, so we have a
Oh,
very long time
well,
till
I
that.
just saw the trailer and decided I was
Yeah, it
like,
does look
finally, a
awesome.
movie that I'd like to see.
Yeah, it does look very
No, I
very cool.
for what it's worth, I was excited to see Sound of Freedom. I was like, oh, we're making an impact on the culture. It's an important issue. I'm going to go see it. I was going to buy more tickets for it, and then I saw it. I was just really disappointed.
Okay. Well, anyways, changing topics. You have a report coming, a white paper coming out on the student loan issue, right? When is this coming out? This is coming out next week, but which do you know like which day? Is it going to be early
Yeah,
next
and I
week?
don't know yet which day, but it'll come out sometime next week. It's something called Policy Focus. That we call Backgrounders at Independent Women's Forum. But I think it's really critical that the right actually has a proposal to deal with student loan debt. And I guess here I'll lay out what I think was wrong with the right and the way that they think about it. Um, of the whole issue, and then I'll say why I think this is the solution and actually serves the right a lot better than what we're currently doing. Um, so first, the first solution or the first way that the right talks about this is just to deny that there's a problem with student loan debt. A lot of this, I think, is very like old economy Steve kind of stuff, right? It's people who went to school 20 or 30 years ago and remember working part time to pay off, and just not the reality anymore that the cost of university has, depending whether you go to public or private, has either doubled or tripled. Um, and that's just, it's well past what your typical 18-year-old could ever hope to to actually have his his labor valued at. Just the cost of college has completely exploded, and there are all kinds of reasons for that. But so that one is just like sort of out of touch, and I really don't think that that's. I don't think you get when you deny the problems that people are facing that are right in front of their face, you're just never going to get anywhere. All you're going to do is burn your own credibility. And then the other thing is this like personal responsibility narrative, which I mean, look, on the face of it is true. You're 18 years old, you're an adult, you signed a loan given to you by the government. I just think it's a little bit unrealistic to expect 18-year-olds to have better financial judgment than the message coming from their parents overwhelmingly, and the message coming from the U.S. Congress, and all of the incentives that are in place. I mean, essentially, what it is you get bombarded from all sides. If you are successful, if you graduate from high school, you even if you are not academically prepared for college, there's this enormous incentive now because every kid comes with a government-backed loan. The colleges get their money up front. So they have an incentive, especially on the lower part of the ranking, to really admit a lot of totally academically unprepared students. A lot of them, 40% of college students, freshmen, they don't graduate even in 6 years. So not forget about the 4-year graduation rate. The 6-year graduation rate is 60%. So you have a lot of people who end up with debt and no degree, which is truly the worst of all worlds. The number of jobs that are available to people with high school degrees, that job market is shrinking. And the same jobs, we have so heavily subsidized the college track that the same jobs that 20 or 30 years ago would not have required a college degree and haven't like changed. It's not like the job has changed. Um, it's just that we have created such a glut of people with degrees that everybody can use it as this kind of threshold mechanism. And so if you take into account all of the policy choices that we've made and all of the cultural pressure to go to university, I think it's a little naive to say, oh, like this kid signed on the dotted line. That was considered a responsible thing to do when he did it. It wasn't like it wasn't considered an outlandish thing to do. It was considered the right thing to do for an entire generation and a half. And now we're seeing the results of that. So all of that is why I think I think it's a really powerful issue for the left, and we saw that. We saw that in the midterms. We had young people turn out in the midterms, basically based on Joe Biden's forgiveness plan. Of course, it's totally cynical on his part. His administration is going to try to go around this Supreme Court case. They're going to find a different alternative legal basis for forgiveness. But this is it's a real issue. It's going to keep clobbering the right over and over again until we do something about it. And my proposal that's coming out is basically lays out some of the facts about why the current forgiveness and why Joe Biden's ideas about forgiveness are unfair and regressive and really do take from people who are already struggling and give to the children of the upper middle class, which is extremely unfair in my view. But I think there's an obvious villain in all of this, and that's the universities. And I think they're a villain for a variety of reasons, but even within this sort of financial picture, they've made an enormous amount of money. A lot of it is not a free market. It's a taxpayer, heavily taxpayer subsidized system. There are a lot of universities in this country whose lifeblood is the government-backed student loan. If we are going to do some kind of limited forgiveness plan, I think it should come from the university sector. And I think we should open them up to taxation on a number of levels. And I have a few proposals of how to do that. But I think basically that the right's answer to this should be, this is a problem. It's a problem that has been in part created both by the government and by universities themselves. Universities have been the biggest beneficiary of the system as it's been for the last 30 to 50 years. And I think it's time that they pay their fair share.
Mm. Yeah. So a couple things, like when you say, oh, there was, we say personal responsibility, but like it's not realistic because everyone was telling them, they should go to college and that's the thing to do. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But I worry that once we go down that road, I mean, this is what leftists say about everything, right? Oh, somebody took out a loan for a house. Well, it's good to have a home. Society did, we do have, tax credits and things like that. Oh, you can't be responsible for your mortgage. Oh, people are, whatever. It seems like it's an argument that could almost work for anything. And that's a concern at the same time, I like, I think I do, I'm not opposed to your idea. I mean, I think it's better than the alternative, which is the Biden plan to stick it to the, to just stick it to the, taxpayer, hurting the universities, I think, and, holding them responsible and knowing they've gotten wealthy over this and just hitting them for being, so terrible. I mean, I think is not a bad thing, either. So yeah, I mean, like it'd be, it would be an interesting political debate to watch, right? Because if, let's say, the Republicans listen to you, what's the name of your report? Does it have a title?
Oh, it doesn't have a title yet, but it'll probably be something like taxing universities to pay for loan forgiveness,
Yeah.
something very
Yeah.
direct. But
Yeah.
I think there is some interest in this on the right. I've talked to some people on the Hill who are looking for these kinds of proposals. But the cultural piece that you described is, I think, the smallest part of it. We have made some very, very real policy decisions. We've decided to put all of our incentives towards getting a 4-year degree. And I mean, Obama said back in his term, he said, by 2020, we want to have 100% of American kids going to college. Okay, we're just going to make college an
Did Obama say it?
extension,
Really?
right? Yeah.
Mm.
Every American kid goes to college. I mean, this idea started all the way back with the LBJ administration. It's when student loans really became, a part of the federal budget that was significant, as opposed to before there was just the GI Bill, right? The idea that we're going to expand the GI Bill basically to all of America. Look, we are already responsible for these loans. 92% of them are held by the Department of Education. Yeah, you sent me a New York Times article detailing how these loans are likely going to go into default. Before the pandemic, it was about a 40% prediction default rate by 2023. Now everything's on hold, so we don't know what's going to happen. But I imagine when payments resume, which will be sometime in, I think, October 1, we'll see if that actually happens. But as of now, the administration is saying October 1. When those loans start to resume and the payments start to resume, I think you're going to see a high default rate. We already on the hook for that. So if we do nothing, the taxpayer will bail out these loans because that's financial picture. What's really sick about all of this, by the way, is these are one of the reasons it's hard to do anything about student loans politically is not anything to do with how many people hold them and all that. That's all creating a political picture. But the reason it's really hard to do anything with regard to student loans, including, for example, something like lowering the interest rate, is quite high, um, is because these loans are one of the few pieces of the federal budget that are quote unquote making money, right? So on a spreadsheet, it's in the black. We know these loans are going to default, but in the federal budget, when they get scored in the black. And so that is paying for parts of Obamacare. It's paying for parts of like a bunch of other things that people want to spend money on in the federal budget. And so it's like all this imaginary monopoly money that there's a lot of different senators and congressmen who have their, projects that are tied to this line item in the budget that have nothing to do with student loans. So it becomes very, very difficult to deal with the actual reality that these loans, the value of a college degree is not enough now on average to actually like buttress the amount of money that universities are charging for it, because there's no mechanism to keep those things in check. There's no free market mechanism because these are loans backed by the federal government. And you can understand why. If you go in to Wells Fargo and you say, I want to study, whatever useless, I used to use underwater basket weaving, but I'm sure you can fill in whatever you'd like. But I want to study this and I want $120,000 to do that. The bank is going to look at whether or not you can pay that back. The federal government won't. The federal government is just like, oh yeah, here, just sign on this line. Like, fill out this form, sign on this line. Here's all the access that you have to these different loans. And we would call that, I think that's predatory, frankly. I think that it's just sort of shape of a lot of the things that we have, which is this two-part public-private thing where there's this public program and certain public priorities. And then there's people making a huge amount of money off of it in the private sector. And they don't have the responsibility. Like, we're not defaulting to banks. You're going to default to the taxpayer. Like, it's the taxpayer's money that's on the hook here. Since these loans are essentially nationalized. And before they were nationalized, they were more like Fannie and Freddie, right? So we had some private, some of these loans were held privately, but they were backed by guarantees by the federal government in a variety of ways. Under the Obama administration, they were brought in-house. So largely the Department of Education bought up all these loans. And now I think it's like something like 8% of loans that are held outside of the Department of Education. So overwhelmingly, these are already a public program. So anyway, I think the universities here are the bad guys. They've made an enormous amount of money. More than that, they've really replaced, and this is something you know a lot better than me, and maybe you can jump in here, but they've really, because of a sort of 1-2 combination of the professionalization of a service economy, and that's sort of the natural piece of this. But then if you add in alongside that, you're not allowed as an employer to screen your employees in all kinds of what might be cheaper or more natural ways because of this Supreme Court decision Griggs, and then potentially changes to civil rights law, right? That anything that produces a disparate impact, like a test, is potentially suspect under the EEOC, and employers are afraid of administering those kinds of tests and so on and so forth. So instead, what we've done is we've made it a requirement to get into like the middle class for people to take out $100,000 in loans and then not compensate them enough to make that make sense.
You say we did that, but the universities didn't create civil rights law, right? And then a lot of the people who defend universities will say that a lot of the administrative bloat, I don't know how much this is true or how much they're exaggerating, comes from government regulation. So like Title IX, for example, they had to, under the Obama administration, they had to hire all these new people. So that sounds like put those things together. It sounds like the problem may be universities. It may just be the federal government. Who's the government? Well, the taxpayer. It's us. You get around to, bail them out and put it on the taxpayer, right? Could you get there?
Look, the idea that universities have nothing to do with this, I find really ludicrous. It is, yes, it's a public-private, there are two pieces of this, right? And yes, some of this is compliance and so on, but fundamentally, they're the only sector, or at least one of very small number of sectors that has their product completely subsidized and underwritten by the federal government. Okay. So the idea that they now get to say, like, well, this is a free market. We didn't have anything to do with this. Their business model is dependent on federally backed student loans. If those loans disappear, this would be my preferred solution, which we have been trying to do for decades, and it's not happening, right? Which is to draw down student loans, to reassert the market, that market value of a degree, to force people to actually go to a private bank that's going to evaluate whether or not the likelihood of you paying back the loan. But it's very difficult to evaluate a loan like that, right? Like there's nothing to repo. So unlike a mortgage, right, you can't declare bankruptcy, because there's nothing to repo and there's no backing other than the person themselves and what they do with their degree. Um, it's an unusual situation, but
What
universities
would
are
be
dependent
your
on these programs. They're completely
would be your
dependent. That's how they do it.
SAT and GPA? I mean, the market would price it in, right? If you seem like a smart kid, they would probably give you a loan, and if you don't seem
It
like a
depends
smart
what you're
kid,
studying too, right? They wouldn't
yeah,
like that because this funds all of those, departments that are, I don't even want to say the DEI departments now, because actually it's gotten to such a degree where you can make enormous amounts of money. There's $1 billion industry in this sort of diversity training and all of this stuff, right? So the ideological compliance is actually quite lucrative now. So it's not even a good example of a degree, but yes, a private institution will look at what you're studying, what your likelihood of finishing the degree is based on whatever information you can give them, whether that's SAT, GPA, anything else, right? They're going to look at those factors. The federal government won't look at those factors. It's also why we have many more universities vis-a-vis, for example, a lot of European countries. Right? You either have to have this. This is there are plenty of American systems like this to me that have this kind of half and half public, half private model. And oftentimes what it means are the costs are socialized onto the taxpayer and the profits are out in the private sector. Right. And in universities' case, it's covered over by the fact that they're quote unquote nonprofit, or a lot of them are. But that that's ridiculous, right? You have a lot of people making millions of dollars. Yale and Harvard are some of the biggest hedge funds in America with universities attached to them. And yet it's all under this umbrella of called being nonprofit. And then let's go to, I mean, they essentially, there are only two real bases that they have to this kind of public largesse that they've enjoyed for decades and decades. They made two basic claims. One is that they were going to add to the GDP, which is still true. It's still true that they add to the GDP. That if you have a degree, you have a higher salary than if you don't over the course of your lifetime. But those benefits are starting to level out. They've been leveling out for the last couple decades. Okay, so you're not getting the same bump, relatively speaking, as you were if you went to college in the 70s or 80s. And then on the other piece, they were supposed to be making us wiser citizens, right? There's some sort of inherent value to education. Well, I believe in the inherent value of the classics. I believe in the inherent value of a liberal education, but that's not what universities are offering now, and everybody knows it. So I don't see on what basis are they going to demand from the taxpayer in Ohio who doesn't have a degree like the majority of Americans? Not only are you going to subsidize Harvard and Yale, but now you're going to pay to bail out the people who did go to university. I mean, it's such an unfair proposition. And by the way, those graduates are going to come back into the corporate plant that's in your town, and they're going to run the diversity program that tells you you're a racist. That's the deal that Americans are getting.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't know, I can see it. I can see your argument for the kids, themselves, right? What do we do with the debtors themselves? To me, I mean, the most important thing is just to get the incentives right. What's so disastrous about what Biden was trying to do and what he wants to do now. He's trying to do it through different means after the Supreme Court struck down his last loan forgiveness plan. Is basically it's just forgiveness. I mean, the system continues exactly the same way it was before. It probably gets worse because the universities know there's an implicit, system where they get a bailout. There's no market correction at all. I think maybe, some people are starting to look at college and maybe seeing it's not all that it's cracked up to be. I think people are getting wiser. I think 15 years ago, people used to be just really, really obsessed with college. Like if your son, went to school and got a sociology degree, like people just thought that was like awesome. I don't know. I don't know when that stopped, but at some point, like it became inflated. People sort of started to realize the universities weren't all they were cracked up to be. People started realizing that not every degree is actually worth something. And so this is disastrous. I mean, the Biden administration is just going to keep funneling money into this beast. I like your thing. I mean, I like your thing. You could let them default, right? That at least doesn't not default, whatever. Let them go on paying forever. At least they they're walking examples. They're just these old people with millions of dollars in debt that they can never discharge. And it's like I always think with the trans thing, like when the gender fluid and the people experimenting get older, I think younger generation are going to see like old people who've become sort of gender fluid or change their gender, and it's going to scare them off. I've always thought something like that would happen. Maybe something like that happens with student loans. Maybe it's already happening. Some people say that the crime rate went down because in the black community, like there was these people, a lot of people were smoking crack, a lot of people were killing each other, a lot of people saw older people doing that, said we don't want to do that anymore. So like every generation sort of you let them learn from their mistakes. The next generation sometimes behaves a little bit better. But your policy is gets rid of that, lets them off the hook. At the same time, at the very least, you're going to the source of the problem. And the source of the problem is we just have too much education and we have too many people going to college, and like this is not necessary. I don't think it even improved GDP. I mean, it was good for the certain people because it's a credential. It's a rat race. It's a zero sum game where some people has credentials, so other people we don't get wealthier. We're wasting some of people's best years of their lives when they could actually be doing something productive. So if you could do this, I would be happy. This would require serious wonkery. This would like when I make policy suggestions. I usually like to focus on court decisions or regulatory changes, just because I think like it's really hard to do controversial legislation. But you'd require a new tax bill for this, right?
Well, there's some things that are already here, and I'm not going to bore everybody. I mean, you can read the paper if you want. There's some things that are already there. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act levies a small tax on endowments. And there were a lot of lobbyists fighting very, very hard
Yeah,
against
so
that for obvious
talk about that
reasons.
because
But,
I
but
found that
yeah.
very interesting in your piece. Do talk about what they did in 2017.
Yeah, so they opened it up. They opened it up a little bit, but it's a 1.4% tax, which is obviously much like I would like to see something. I would like to see this tax like a hedge fund, right? The
On
same way that we would,
endowments.
yeah, on endowments, which are
Yeah,
basically hedge
1.5.
funds, right?
Yeah.
Tax it on capital gains. Democrats are always talking about raising the capital gains tax, right? Like, well, ordinary Americans in their 401k are getting slammed with capital gains tax if they take anything out of it, right? So why not slam universities with that tax and then create a pool for which to do forgiveness, and whatever the other half of the wonkery would be? Okay, like who can apply for forgiveness under what parameters, right? No, but you're right that it's going to make it worse. So this kind of indiscriminate forgiveness is going to make it worse because the underlying problem is the continual upward trend of the cost of college. And that's being buttressed by increasing student loans, right? So you have this negative cycle where the government makes a certain amount of money available because that's how much college costs. And then the colleges get to do that plus $5,000, right, the next year. And then the government raises the amount of loans that are available because now the average cost of college is higher. And then, it keeps going. So the New York Federal Reserve estimated that for every dollar of new student loan debt, so every dollar that becomes available, 60 cents, the price is like an upward pressure, 60 cents, right? So if you look at those charts of inflation over the years of all of these different things, right? Obviously, some things have gone down. The cost of a TV has gone down, for example, right? But some of these really important markers of the middle class, healthcare payments, housing, and then way at the top of that list is college tuition. So inflation on college tuition has gone up something like twice as much as inflation in healthcare costs, right? So we always complain about the healthcare costs, but it's even worse in the universities, and it's because of this cycle. And if we bail out the loans indiscriminately, like the Joe Biden style plan, right, or what Elizabeth Warren wants, which is just a complete debt jubilee, like we wipe out all of the debt, which, by the way, $7 of forgiveness to the top quintile for every $1 to the bottom quintile, because the people in the bottom half of the income spectrum are just not making it into college anymore because it's so expensive, right? that even with student loans, right, all of the costs in terms of housing on campus, in terms of all of these other ways in which universities are making money, textbooks, it's just prohibitive. It's more prohibitive now even than before we had these loans ostensibly for the poor, right? The whole point of these loans was to send the bright young poor kids of America to college. And instead, what it's done is it's locked people out and it's made universities very, very rich. Um, so, I mean, look, there are also cultural effects, obviously. I think that universities are a pernicious influence on the country. I think actually now that's something that's backed by poll numbers. There's less than half Americans think that universities are net positive for the country. Um, there are life script effects that you were referencing, right? It's not just that we push more and more people into this credentialing treadmill where they come out on the other side with a lot of debt. They then can't buy houses and so on and so forth. It's also locking down a woman's prime years to have children in this sort of credentialing rat race. And now part of that is obviously cultural. Um, but again, I don't see why the taxpayer should subsidize that. It's not clear to me. And a lot of this, to go back to your favorite hobby horse topic, a lot of this is just to avoid basically a college credential became the symbol that you could show up on time and probably maybe pass a drug test and like you weren't an idiot. Well, there are cheaper ways to do that, right? There's a much cheaper way of doing that. It's administer some basic kind of test or require certain hoops to be jumped through in the first part of employment. But there's such a high, it's so difficult to fire people because of a lot of this stuff. So if you make a mistake on the upfront end, there's hell to pay afterwards, right? And then a lot of the tests that could be administered, right? Ironically, nobody is looking at the disparate impact of a college degree. And there are, like the EEOC, there people have brought this up. The EEOC has not looked at what the disparate impact of the college degree is, and it's probably just as disparate, if not more so, than any test that could be administered. And so it's sort of this ridiculous thing where it's the one thing the EEOC has decided we're not going to look at. And so that's what employers are using. But this system is costing us an enormous amount of money. It's messing up what people want to do with their lives. It's leaving them with very unpalatable choices. And frankly, it's giving a lot of people that I culturally think are really dangerous for the country way more power than they otherwise would have because they control the pipeline so strongly to certain elite institutions that they've managed to kind of quash all the alternative pipelines. It used to be that you had rich people who got rich by wildcatting oil or whatever, right? So there's just no diversity anymore, genuinely, no diversity in the how you get rich in America script. Maybe Silicon Valley a little bit is sort of different from that. But even, I mean, in later iterations past, like say the early 2000s, even Silicon Valley is not really like that. It's the gold, as ever, is in selling picks and shovels, meaning that the gold is in making $300,000 a year and doing, something that's working for a larger company. Anyway, I think there have been a lot of negative effects to the country of handing universities this much wealth and power and giving them this kind of monopoly over what is a like smart, hardworking person, right? And I don't think that they deserve that at all. I don't think they've proven that they're worthy of that kind of subsidization.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of these things, yeah, I don't know if it's that bad that, you can't get rich in any way without a college degree or without a
No, that's
fancy
not what I
degree.
said, to be clear.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
But
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
the path is, right? So like the path is to be Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, yeah, I think there is a sort of a narrowing of people's like horizons. There's a great homogenization. So I remember during the oil boom, I guess it's probably still going on, or I don't know if it's still going on, but like in North Dakota, was it South Dakota, whichever one had the oil. Um, I remember you could go and you could make six figures. They were desperate for people, like a young man with some, I guess he had to have some strength or something, could go out there and make 100 something thousand a year without any education. A lot of people don't want to do hard labor in South Dakota or North Dakota or whichever one it is,
It's
right?
North Dakota, I think.
They're yeah, okay, yeah, and so yeah, so this is and so yeah, so this is like you're right. We're giving people the script, and the script is just not good. It's not good for family formation. It's not good for the economy. It's not good for the labor market. And yeah, I mean, whatever policy we end up doing on student loans, whether it's anything, what anything or nothing. Um, it, its goodness or its badness will be judged by me to be based on, does it make it likely that more or fewer people are going to go to college? That's what I'm going to judge it on. Like yours would probably hurt the colleges. Biden's would probably, help them. But I think that's like sort of the key way to analyze it. Not even what the secondary concern. I mean, the fact that it's just bad. We're wasting people's prime years sitting at a desk, jumping through hoops. That's just a terrible way to organize society.
Yeah, well, and there's an ideological component to it now too. So everything that you say is true and is the baseline of all of this, but now it's in addition, it's sort of ideologically radicalized, right? And we have all of these problems and all of the institutions that are these kind of like cultural revolutionaries are every rank at the bottom is more sort of aggressively ideological than the one before. And so that's why a lot of CEOs, for example, it's not just the pressure from the outside groups, it's the pressure within the companies of a lot of these sort of professional class college educated quote unquote employees, right? They have to satisfy to some degree their sort of political views of their employees in this professional class. There's sort of this endless list of both ideological, cultural, and also financial consequences of forcing everybody into this. And at the end of the day, we think about how much progress we've made or whatever, because a lot of people have grandparents who had an eighth grade education, but then you go back and you read the textbooks from eighth grade in 1900. And a lot of it is more substantial than what's taught in half of university classes today. So who really had a better education? I mean, and standards are through the floor for a lot of these same incentives, right? Because every high school graduate comes with a check. It doesn't matter how unprepared. And of course, we're graduating more people from high school because the standards are dropping there as well. But we're graduating more people from high school. Now, every one of those college graduates is going to get bombarded with a bunch of offers from low tier universities because every single one of them comes with a check from the feds. And that kid ends up with a job that doesn't pay the $100,000 he took out. So he gets stuck with the loan, but the university got the $100,000 up front. They're doing great. It doesn't matter that the kid dropped out, in his third year because he couldn't actually do mathematics.
Yeah, I mean, we've done something terrible culturally. You have a book on the Imjin War right behind you, which I just told you I started reading, and it starts with sort of a background on Chinese cultural history, and it's really just amazing. The society sort of during the Ming Dynasty was just built like based around tests. Like if you were the person who took the test, you got to be a government official that gave you status. Um, we're a much lighter version of that, but it's something like that. The big dynasty, they had no like expertise in anything like economics or military matters or whatever. It was just whoever like memorized the Confucian classics, and they probably all had high IQs, but they just had no practical knowledge or no ability to run a country well, other than their intelligence. So yeah, I mean, this is this became the source of sort of status of the entire society, and the society had like this is again much lighter version of what we had, but the society had contempt for merchants, for commerce, for the stuff that actually makes society wealthy. Um, and so, yeah, on that thought, we are in accord on higher education. So before we go, how can people find your report when it comes out?
It'll be on iwf.org, and then I'll probably tweet it out so you can go engage with me on Twitter and make me push me over the line for Elon Musk money. No, it should be on iwf.org, and I'll be pushing it out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, follow Inez on Twitter if you don't. Okay, thanks, Inez.